Brazil, in your hotel room. I'm alive, more or less. JV carried Nate into the bathroom, into the shower, where he fell onto the plastic floor. I'm sorry, Nate said over and over again. JV left him there and went downstairs for a pot of strong coffee. It was almost 2 when Welly heard them coming. JV parked on the bank. There was no sign of the American. Then a head slowly lifted itself from inside the car. The eyes were covered with thick shades, and a cap was pulled as low as possible. JV walked to the passenger door and helped Mr. O'Reilly out. He looked very sick, with white skin that was wet with sweat, and he was too weak to walk alone. JV almost carried him up the steps onto the boat where the hammock was waiting. He pushed him into it. "What's wrong with him?" Welly asked. "He's drunk." "But it's only 2 o'clock. "He's been drunk for a long time." The Santa Laura moved away from the shore and slowly made its way
for 4
past
hours.
Corumbá, and the Santa Laura traveled slowly toward the north. The sun was beginning to fall behind the distant mountains of Bolivia. The air was light and much cooler. "The water is high," JV said. "We'll go much faster on the return." He pointed to a place on the map. "The first Indian village is in this area. It will take 2, maybe 3 days." Nate didn't care. Time had stopped. His watch was in his pocket. He'd cheated death, and so every day now was a gift. "Are you okay?" JV asked. "I'm fine. I feel good. This little trip will be good for me." There was a lot more JV wanted to ask, but Nate wasn't ready to talk. He went back to his hammock with the papers Josh had given him. He put insect repellent on his arms and legs and began to read. The courtroom filled with members of the Phelan family and their lawyers. At 10 o'clock, Judge Wycliffe came in. The room was silent as he took his place at the front of the court. "Good morning," he said. Everyone smiled back. To his great satisfaction, the room was full. "Is everybody here?" he asked. "I need to identify everyone. The first papers were filed by Rex Phelan." Hark Geddes jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, I'm Hark Geddes," he said loudly. "I represent Mr. Rex Phelan." "Thank you. You may take your seat." Wycliffe went around the tables, taking the names of the heirs and their lawyers. 6 children, 3 ex-wives. Everyone was present. 22 lawyers, Wycliffe said to himself. "Do you have the will, Mr. Stafford?" he asked. Josh stood, holding a file. "I do." "You represented Troy Phelan," Wycliffe asked. "Did you prepare a will for him?" "I prepared several." "Did you prepare his last will?" There was a pause. It grew longer as the Phelans leaned closer. "No, I did not," Josh said slowly. The words were soft, but they cut through the air like thunder. The courtroom grew quiet. "Who prepared his last will and testament?" Wycliffe asked. "Mr. Phelan himself." "Oh, my God," Hark Geddes said, under his breath, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "When did he sign it?" Wycliffe asked. "Moments before he jumped to his death." "Did he sign it in your presence?" "He did. There were other witnesses. The signing was also videotaped." "Please hand me the will." "What is this?" Troy Jr. whispered to the nearest lawyer. The lawyer didn't respond. Fear seized the Phelans, but there was nothing they could do. Was the money slipping away? Wycliffe cleared his throat. I'm holding here a one-page document that is the will of Troy Phelan. I will read it straight through. He read the will. Even Ramble heard the words and understood them. Gina and Cody started crying softly. Rex leaned forward, his face buried in his hands. Mary Ross covered her eyes as her lawyer rubbed her knee. Her husband rubbed the other one. The journalists were excited. They wanted to take notes, but they were afraid of missing a single word. Some couldn't help grinning. Wycliffe finished reading the document. He laid it down and looked around the room. The Phelans sat low in their seats. For the moment, all 22 lawyers were incapable of speech. Then they began to smile. They were going to get rich. Their clients were heavily in debt and had no choice. They had to fight the will. The lawsuit would go on. The head of South American missions was a woman named Neva Collier. She'd spent 11 years working in the mountains of New Guinea, so she understood the challenges of the 900 people whose activities she organized. And she was the only person who knew that Rachel Porter had once been Rachel Lane, illegitimate daughter of Troy Phelan. After medical school, Rachel had changed her name to wipe out her past. She had no family. Both adoptive parents had died. She had only Troy, and she was desperate to remove him from her life. After completing the World Tribes training, Rachel had told her secrets to Neva Collier. Neva had promised never to tell anyone about Rachel, including where she was in South America. Sitting in her small, neat office in Houston, Neva read the extraordinary account of Mr. Phelan's will. She'd followed the story since the suicide. Communication with Rachel was slow. They exchanged mail twice a year, in March and August. Rachel usually called once a year from a payphone in Corumbá when she went there for supplies. Neva had spoken to her the year before. Rachel's last vacation had been in 1992. She had no interest in the United States. It was not her home. She belonged with her people. The lawyers met at a hotel in a large room where the tables had been hastily put together in a perfect square. There were 50 people in the room. No Phelans were present, only their legal teams. Hark Geddes started the meeting. He suggested that each lawyer briefly state his or her ideas about the lawsuit. Grit, the lawyer hired by Mary Ross Phelan Jackman and her husband, stood and demanded war. We must challenge the will. The old man was crazy. He jumped to his death, and he gave one of the world's great fortunes to an unknown heir. Sounds crazy to me. We can find psychiatrists who'll say he was crazy. What about the 3 who examined him before he jumped? Someone said from across the table. That was stupid, Grit said. Phelan fooled you, and you guys fell for it. The head of the legal team for Gina and Cody Strong was a woman named Langhorne. She'd once been a professor at Georgetown Law School. Her lecture lasted 10 minutes and covered little new ground. Her conclusion was to challenge the will and hope for an out-of-court settlement. Libigale's lawyer, Wally Bright, was next. He had his own small company that usually handled quick divorces. He wore a dirty suit and a tie that was at least 20 years old. He had nothing prepared, no notes, no thoughts about what he would say next. He talked about injustice in general. 2 of Lillian's lawyers stood at the same time. One started a sentence and the other finished it. They repeated what had already been said. The lawyers all agreed. Fight, because A, there was little to lose, B, there was nothing else to do, and C, they would get paid by the hour for fighting. An hour passed before someone mentioned the contest clause in the will. The heirs risked losing what little Troy had left them if they contested the will. The lawyers spent little time considering this. They wanted to fight the will, and they knew their greedy clients would follow their advice. Not one brave voice suggested that the will be accepted. They discussed Rachel and where she might be. Should they try to find her? But they decided not to look for her because they couldn't agree what they would do if they found her. The meeting ended on a pleasant note. The lawyers gave themselves the result they wanted. They left to call their clients and proudly report how much progress they'd made. Chapter 7. Alligators and Indians. Nate spent the morning reading. Javy joined him for coffee. "So, what do you think of the Pantanal?" he asked. "It's magnificent. Were you born here?" "I took my first breath in the hospital at Corumba, but I was born on these rivers. This is my home." "You told me your father was a river pilot." "Yes. When I was a small boy, I began going with him. Early in the morning, when everybody was asleep, he would allow me to take the wheel. I knew all the main rivers by the time I was 10. "And he died on the river?" "Not this, but the Takiri to the east. 5 years ago he was guiding a boat of Germans when a storm hit them. Only the deckhand lived." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "A lot of people want to destroy the Pantanal. Big companies that own big farms. They are clearing large sections of land for their crops. The soil is not good, so the companies use chemicals to grow crops, and the chemicals get into the water. They run into the rivers. The rivers eventually run into the Pantanal. Our fish swallow them and die." "Doesn't the government help?" Javy gave a bitter laugh. "Have you heard of Hidrovia?" "No." "It's a big ditch. It will be cut through the Pantanal to link Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, and Uruguay. It is supposed to save South America, but it will drain the Pantanal, and our government supports it." Nate wanted to say something deep and serious about taking care of the environment. Then he remembered that his countrymen had destroyed large areas of the United States in the name of progress. "It's still beautiful," Nate said. "It is. Sometimes I think it's too big for them to destroy. There is a small trading post a few hours away. We should be there before dark. Fernando is the owner, and he hears everything on the river. Maybe he will know something about the missionaries." Javy emptied his coffee cup and stretched his arms. "Sometimes he has beer for sale. I think we should not buy any." He walked away. "Fine with me," thought Nate. A cold, brown bottle of beer, excellent beer. He began to sweat, though the sun was hidden and there was a cool wind. He buried himself in the hammock and prayed for sleep, a deep sleep that would take him past their stop and into the night. He was wide awake when the boat stopped. There were voices, then a gentle bump as they docked at the trading post. Nate swore he would remain on the boat. He would stay on the deck. The coldest beer in the world couldn't pull him away. There was no such thing as a short visit in Brazil, but finally Javy bought 30 gallons of fuel and started the engine. Fernando says there is a woman missionary. She works with the Indians. J.V. handed him a bottle of cold water. They were moving again. Where? He's not sure. The Indians don't move on the river, so he doesn't know much about them. How far is the nearest settlement? We should be close by morning, but we can't take this boat. Portuguese explorer we must use Pedro Alvarez Cabral first stepped on Brazilian soil in 1500. The country had 5 million Indians. After 5 centuries of European civilization, only 270,000 survived. It was a sick and violent history. If the Indians tried to live with the Europeans, they caught strange diseases and died. If they fought the Europeans, they were killed by weapons more deadly than poison arrows. They were the slaves of ranchers and rubber farmers. Men with guns drove them from their homes. Priests murdered them, and armies hunted them. Now the government was also the enemy. In 1967, the agency in charge of Indian affairs used chemical weapons to kill Indians. They gave the Indians clothing that was infected with diseases. Using airplanes and helicopters, they bombed Indian villages and land with poison gas. In the 1990s, the government wanted to open up the region to the north of the Pantanal, but the Indians were still in the way. The abuse of Indians was growing as ranchers pushed deep into the Amazon with the support of the government. Nate read this sad history for 4 hours, then went to drink coffee with J.V. "Do you have any Indian blood?" he asked. J.V. smiled. "All of us have Indian blood. Why do you ask?" "I've been reading the history of the Indians in Brazil. It's pretty tragic." "It is. Do you think the Indians have been treated badly here?" "Of course they have." "What about in your country?" "Not much better, I'm afraid," Nate said. It wasn't a matter he wanted to discuss. It was still dark when the engine stopped and Nate woke up. Welly was loading the small boat. 3 large gas tanks were arranged neatly in the center of the boat. "These should give us 15 hours, J.V. explained. "How far away is the settlement?" Nate asked. "I'm not sure." J.V. packed a small tent, 2 blankets, 2 mosquito nets, some food, and bottled water. The last item he packed was a large knife. "This is for the alligators," he said, laughing. Nate tried to ignore it. Nate took the copy of the will, folded it, and placed it in an envelope. He wrapped the envelope in a piece of cloth, taped it to his T-shirt, and covered it with a sweater. They waved goodbye to Welly. Mist settled just above the water, and it was cool. Since leaving Corumbá, Nate had observed the river from the safety of the top deck. Now he was almost sitting in it. They entered the mouth of the tributary that would take them to the Indians. The water there was much calmer. On J.V.'s river map, the tributary was called the Cabitha. It curled like string out of Brazil and into Bolivia, and apparently went nowhere. J.V. slowed the boat as they approached the first fork. A river of the same size branched to the left. Which route would keep them on the Cabitha? But all the rivers led back to the Paraguay. If they took a wrong turn, the currents would eventually lead them back to Welly. An hour later, they approached a little hut with a red roof. There were no signs of humans or animals. "In the flood season, many people in the Pantanal move to higher ground. They load up their cows and kids and leave for 3 months, J.V. said. "What about the Indians?" Nate asked. "They move around too." "Wonderful. We don't know where they are, and they like to move around." Javy laughed and said, "We'll find them." Nate had completely forgotten about being eaten when they went around a bend and came close to a group of alligators sleeping in shallow water. The boat frightened and upset them. Tails moved and water splashed. But the reptiles they entered a large lake with more than a dozen little rivers twisting into it. Javy didn't know which one was the Cabitha. They saw a man fishing at the side of the lake. When they were a few meters away, Javy began talking to him. Finally, he said goodbye, and they paddled away. "His mother was Indian," Javy said. "There's a settlement a few hours from here." "A few hours?" "3, maybe." Nate moved lower in the boat and found a spot on the bottom between the box of food and the fuel tanks. The boat slowed. Engine trouble wasn't something he'd worried about. Suddenly, Nate was really scared. Then they were off again, the motor roaring as if nothing had happened. It became a routine. Every 20 minutes, just as Nate was falling asleep, the steady beat of the motor would stop. Javy played with the engine, then things would be fine for another 20 minutes. The first sign of the settlement came 7 hours after they left the Santa Lura. Nate saw a thin line of blue smoke rising above the trees near the foot of a hill. Javy was certain they were in Bolivia. The ground was higher, and they were close to the mountains. They came to a gap in the trees and saw 2 canoes. Javy guided the boat to the bank. Nate quickly jumped out, anxious to stretch his legs and feel the earth. "Stay close," Javy warned. Nate looked at him. Their eyes met, and Javy nodded toward the trees. An Indian was watching them. A male, brown-skinned, bare-chested, with a grass skirt hanging from his waist. No visible weapon. He had long black hair and red stripes on his forehead. He was very frightening. "Is he friendly?" Nate asked, without taking his eyes off the man. "I think so." "Does he speak Portuguese?" "I don't know." "Why don't you go find out?" "Relax." Javy stepped from the boat. "He looks like he wants to eat you," he whispered. Nate wasn't amused. Javy spoke to the Indian, but it was obvious he didn't speak Portuguese. He looked young, probably not 20. There was a movement behind the Indian. 3 of his tribesmen appeared. They weren't friendly folk. There were no smiles or hellos. A young female suddenly appeared from the trees and stood next to the first Indian. She, too, was brown and bare-chested. Nate tried not to stare. She seemed to understand Javy. Speaking slowly, Javy asked to see their chief. She translated his words to the men, who talked among themselves. "Some want to eat us now," Javy said to Nate under his breath. "Some want to wait until tomorrow." Very funny. When the men finished talking, they reported to the woman. She told Javy that they must wait by the river. Javy asked if a woman missionary lived with them. "You must wait," she said. The Indians disappeared into the wood. "What do you think?" Nate asked when they were gone. "They catch diseases from outsiders," Javy explained. "That's why they're careful." They returned to the boat. Javy cleaned the engine. Nate looked at the papers under his sweater. They were still dry. "Those papers are for the woman?" Javy asked. "Yes." "Why? What has happened to her?" "Her father died a few weeks ago. He left her a lot of money." "How much?" "Several billion. He was very wealthy." "Did he have other children?" "6, I think." "Did he give them several billion?" "No, he gave them very little." "Did she love her father?" "I doubt it. She was illegitimate. It looks as if she tried to get away from him and from everything else. Don't you think? Nate waved his arm at the Pantanal. Why did he leave a fortune to a child who didn't love him? Maybe he was crazy. He jumped out of a window. This was more than JV could understand. He looked at the river, deep, who preferred no contact with outsiders. They grew their food in small patches, fished the rivers, and hunted with bows and arrows. After an hour, JV smelled smoke. He climbed a tree near the boat, and Nate joined him. They could see the tops of 3 huts. Was he so close to Rachel Lane? Was she there now, listening to her people and deciding what to do? Would she send an Indian to bring them? Or would she simply walk through the wood and say hello? What do you think they're doing? He asked. Talking. Just talking. Well, we need to leave soon. We left the boat 8.5 hours ago. I'd like to see Welly before dark. No problem. We'll go back with the current. And I know the way. It will be much faster. Back on the ground, Nate had settled into the boat to sleep when JV saw the Indians. They slowly approached the river behind their chief. He carried a long stick. It didn't appear sharp or dangerous. The chief directed his comments at JV. "Why are you here?" he asked in Portuguese. His face wasn't friendly, but he wasn't aggressive. "We are looking for an American missionary, a woman," JV explained. "We've come from Corumbá. This man is an American. He needs to find the woman." "Why does he need to find the woman? Is she in danger?" It was the first hint that the Indians might know of Rachel Lane. "No. She is not here." "Have you ever seen a woman missionary around here?" JV asked. At first there was no response. Then a slight nod. The man pointed somewhere off to the north and west. "She's with another tribe?" JV asked. "Wato?" "Ipicas," the man said. "How far away?" "A day." JV opened 2 maps and spread them on the ground. The Indians were very curious. The chief told JV that they hadn't come in on the Cabita. They'd taken a wrong turn onto the River Guato. JV whispered the news to Nate. Nate was worried. He was trusting JV with his life. The Indians talked among themselves. They couldn't agree on a route to get to the Ipicas. Finally, they turned again to JV. "There is a settlement of Ipicas at the edge of the mountains," JV translated. "How do we get there?" Nate asked. "I think we go back to the Santa Laura and go north half a day on the Paraguay. Then we use the little boat again to get to the settlement." "Then what are we waiting for?" Nate asked, standing and smiling at the Indians. JV said thank you to their hosts. The Indians offered food, which JV declined. He explained that they were in a great hurry because they wanted to return to the big river before dark. It was almost 4 p.m. With luck, they could reach the Cabita before dark. Welly would be waiting with beans and rice. As Nate did these quick calculations, he felt the first raindrops. The motor shut down completely after 50 minutes. The current kept them moving, but they went very slowly. JV tried to fix the engine. He pulled the starter rope as Nate said a prayer. On the 4th pull, the engine started, though not as smoothly as before. "We'll have to go slower," JV said. "Fine, as long as we know where we are." "No problem." The storm crept over the mountains of Bolivia, then roared into the Pantanal. Nate was sitting low in the boat, watching the river to the east, when he felt the wind. The rain suddenly fell harder. He slowly turned and looked behind him. The sky was dark gray, almost black. Nate felt completely helpless. There was nowhere to hide. There was nothing except water around them, water in all directions. A strong wind swept in behind them, driving the boat forward as the rain hit their backs. Nate wanted to curl up and hide. They came to a fork in the river, then to a meeting of rivers. They could hardly see through the rain. Nate was certain they were lost. J.V. quickly turned the boat around. Now they raced into the storm, and it was a frightening sight. The sky was black. The current was stirring up the river. Just before dark, J.V. chose another small river, one of several. Then lightning came, and for a while they could almost see where they were going. The rain wasn't so heavy. The storm was slowly leaving them. "We should make camp," J.V. said. "We might get lost if we keep going in the dark." "We've been lost for 3 hours," Nate wanted to say. J.V. guided the boat to a bank and tied a guide rope to a tree. When the wind stopped, the mosquitoes arrived. Nate rubbed repellent on his neck and face, even his eyelids and hair. The mosquitoes were quick and vicious and moved in small black clouds. Around 11 p.m., the sky cleared, but there was no moon. Nate tried his best to get comfortable. As he stretched his legs, his T-shirt rose slightly, and a dozen mosquitoes attacked his waist. Sleep was impossible. Chapter 8. The Missionary. Flo, Zadell, and Tyshan, the 3 psychiatrists who had declared Troy Phelan sane, were fired. New psychiatrists were found. Hark Geddes bought the first one at $300 an hour. The heirs couldn't pay high hourly fees to the lawyers, so the lawyers agreed to take percentages of the final settlements. Hark wanted 40%, but he and Rex finally agreed on 25%. Grit squeezed 25% out of Mary Ross Phelan Jackman. The winner was Wally Bright, who insisted on half of Libigale's settlement. None of the Phelan heirs asked if they were doing the right thing. They trusted their lawyers. No one could afford to be left out. Because Hark was the loudest of the Phelan lawyers, he caught the attention of Sneed. No one had noticed Sneed since the suicide. When the will was read, he was sitting in the courtroom, his face disguised with sunglasses and a hat. He'd left in tears. He hated the Phelan children because Troy hated them. Over the years, Sneed had been forced to do many unpleasant things to protect Troy from his families. And in return, Mr. Phelan left him nothing. Not a cent. Over the years, the old man had made many promises to take care of Sneed. He knew that he'd been named in one will. He'd seen the document himself. He would inherit $1 million when Mr. Phelan died. At the time, Mr. Phelan was worth $3 billion, and Sneed remembered thinking how small $1 million seemed. He'd occasionally asked about the matter, but Mr. Phelan had cursed him and threatened to cut him out completely. "You're as bad as my children," he'd said to poor Sneed. Somehow he'd gone from $1 million to $0, and he was bitter about it. He would join the enemies simply because he had no choice. He went to Hark Geddes' office. The receptionist explained that Mr. Geddes was very busy. "So am I," Sneed replied rudely. "Give him this envelope, it's urgent. I'll wait for 10 minutes, then I'll walk down the street to the next law office." The envelope held a note that read, "I worked for Troy Phelan for 30 years. I know everything. Malcolm Sneed." Hark appeared immediately, took Sneed into a large office, and locked the door. "So you worked for Phelan for 30 years, Hark said. Were you with him when he jumped? Did you see him sign the will, the last one?" Sneed was prepared to lie. The truth meant nothing. What was there to lose? "I saw a lot of things," he said, "and I know a lot more. This visit is about money. Mr. Phelan promised that he would take care of me in his will. There were many promises, all broken." Was he crazy? He was or he wasn't, doesn't matter to me. This is the way I see it. Since they're all heavily in debt, the kids have to contest the will. No jury's gonna feel sorry for them. They're a bunch of greedy losers. It'll be a tough case to win. But you and the other lawyers will attack the will, and you'll create this huge lawsuit that gets in the newspapers. You don't have much of a case, so you hope for a settlement before you go to court. The size of your settlement depends on my information about Mr. Phelan's state of mind. What do you want? Money. $5 million. That's a lot. It's nothing. I'll take it from this side or the other. It doesn't matter. Any more witnesses? Hark asked. Only one. Her name is Nicolette. She was Mr. Phelan's last secretary. She can be bought. You've already talked to her. Every day. We're a package. She's covered in the $5 million. Hark closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. I don't object to your $5 million. I just don't know how we can get it to you. I need to think about this. I'm in no hurry, Sneed said. I'll give you a week. If you say no, then I'll go to the other side. There is no other side. Don't be so certain. You know something about Rachel Lane? I know everything, Sneed said. At dawn, then the current was strong, so they moved with it as the sun rose. The only sound was the rush of the water. I guess we're lost, aren't we? Nate said. I know exactly where we are. Where? We're in the Pantanal, and all rivers run to the Paraguay. J.V. tried to start the motor. On the fifth pull, the motor caught and then died. I'll die here, Nate said to himself. I'll either drown, starve, or be eaten. To their surprise, they heard a shout. A kid of no more than 15 came toward them in a tiny canoe. A long, lazy conversation followed. What's he saying? Nate asked J.V. He says the Indians are not far away. How far? 1 hour, maybe 2. Can he take us there? He may want a few dollars. Fine. The Phelan estate on one side of the table and this little kid on the other. $10, J.V. said, after another brief discussion. Okay. For $10, they would be delivered to Rachel Lane. They followed the boy in the canoe for 20 minutes, until they entered a small, shallow stream. It was almost 1 when they came to the higher ground. The boy seemed afraid to go further. Just up there, he told J.V. Nate gave him the money, and they thanked him. The boy turned back with the current and disappeared quickly. The river ran into a forest where the trees hung low over the water. Nate felt as if they were being watched. He waited for an attack of deadly arrows by Indians dressed in war paint and trained to kill anyone with a white face. But they saw children first. Happy little brown bodies splashing in the water. The mothers were bathing, too. J.V. stopped the engine and began talking and smiling. An older girl ran away toward the settlement. 3 men arrived within minutes. The oldest one said he spoke J.V.'s language. After a few minutes, Nate said, Translation, please. What about the woman? Don't rush it. I'm still trying to persuade them not to burn you alive. More Indians arrived. Their huts were 100 meters away near the edge of the forest. A little boy studied Nate. Very softly he said, "Hello." Nate knew they were in the right place. No one else heard the boy. Nate leaned forward and softly said, "Hello." "Goodbye," the boy said. Rachel had taught him at least 2 English words. "What is your name?" Nate whispered. "Hello," he repeated. Under the tree, the male Indians were talking. "What about the woman?" Nate repeated to Javy. "I'm not sure. I think she's here." They talked some more. Then the Indians left, men first, then the women, then the children. "Did you make them mad?" Nate asked. "No, they want to have a meeting." "Do you think she's here?" "I think so." Javy took his seat in the boat and prepared to sleep. They began to walk at about 3 p.m. A small group of young men led them away from the river, along the path to the village, then out again into the woods. They crossed another trail. Eventually they saw the first hut, then smelled smoke. When they were 200 meters away, the leader pointed to a shaded area near the river. Nate and Javy were led to a bench and left there with 2 guards, while the others went to the village. They wouldn't have brought them so far if Rachel weren't nearby. As Nate rested on the bench and stared at the tops of the huts in the distance, he had many questions about her. What would she look like? What kind of clothes would she wear? How long since she'd seen civilization? Was he the first American to visit the village? How would she react to his presence? And to the money? Both of the guards were asleep when there was movement from the settlement. A group of men walked toward them, and Rachel was with them. Nate saw a light yellow shirt among the brown-skinned chests, and a lighter face under a hat. She was slightly taller than the Indians, and carried herself elegantly. She could have been out for a walk among the flowers, but Rachel kept walking. She removed her hat. Her hair was brown and half-gray, and very short. She was 42 years old, but she looked younger. She didn't shake hands, nor did she give them her name. "My name is Nate O'Reilly. I'm an attorney from Washington." "And you?" she said to Javy. "I'm Javy Cardozo from Corumba. I'm his guide." She looked him up and down with a slight grin. The moment was not at all unpleasant for her. "What brings you here?" she asked. "I'm looking for Rachel Lane. My company has important legal business with her." "What kind of legal business?" "I can only tell her." "I'm not Rachel Lane. I'm sorry." Javy sighed and Nate's shoulders dropped. She saw every movement. "Are you hungry?" she asked them. They both nodded. She called the Indians. "Javy," she said, "go with these men into the village. They will feed you and give you enough food for Mr. O'Reilly." She sat with Nate on the bench and watched silently as the Indians took Javy to the village. He turned around once just to make sure Nate was okay. "Rachel Lane disappeared many years ago," the woman said, looking at the village in the distance. "I kept the name Rachel, but dropped the Lane. It must be serious or you wouldn't be here." She spoke softly and slowly. "Troy's dead. He killed himself 3 weeks ago." She lowered her head slightly, closed her eyes, and prayed. It was a brief prayer, followed by a long pause. Silence didn't bother her. "Did you know him?" she finally asked. "I met him once, years ago. No, I didn't know him." "Neither did I. He was my father, but he was always a stranger. How did you find me? Troy tried to find you before he died, but couldn't. He knew you were a missionary with world tribes, and that you were in this part of the world. It became my job to find you. He had an awful lot of money. That's why I'm here. We need to talk business. Troy left me something in his will? You could say that. I don't want to talk business. I want to chat. I was with a patient just an hour ago when the boys came to tell me that an American was here. I ran to my hut and started praying. God gave me strength. I thought you were a missionary. I am. I'm also a doctor. I changed my name after college, before medical school. That's probably when the trail ended. A light wind came in from the river. She saw him glance at his watch. The boys are bringing your tent here. We'll be safe here, won't we? Yes, God will protect you. Say your prayers. Are these Indians friendly? Mostly, but they don't trust white people. What about you? I've been here 11 years. They accept me. There was a missionary couple here before me. They'd learned the language and translated the Bible. And I'm a doctor. I made friends when I helped the women through childbirth. Javy appeared with a group of Indians. One of them handed Rachel a small square basket. She passed it to Nate, who removed a small loaf of hard bread. We're staying here tonight, Nate said to Javy. It's the best spot, Rachel said. I would offer you a place in the village, but the chief must approve a visit by white men. I would like to leave by noon tomorrow, Nate said. That will also be the chief's decision. You mean we can't leave when we want? You will leave when he says you can leave. Don't worry. Are you and the chief close? We get along. For a few minutes, Rachel watched as Javy and Nate struggled with a tent. I'm going, she announced. You'll be okay here. What time do you folks wake up around here? Nate asked. An hour before sunrise. I'm sure we'll be awake, Nate said, looking at the tent. Can we meet early? We have a lot to discuss. Yes, I'll send some food in the morning. Then we'll talk. Say your prayers, Mr. O'Reilly. She stepped into the darkness and was gone. Chapter 9. A Death. Next morning, Ayesh was walking in front of her mother when she felt the snake move under her bare foot. It struck below her ankle as she screamed. By the time her father got to her, she was in shock, and her right foot had doubled in size. A boy of 15, the fastest runner in the tribe, was sent to get Rachel. There were 4 poisonous snakes in their part of the Pantanal, and Rachel usually had the medicine to cure their bites. But she'd been unable to find the medicine for this type of snake during her last trip to Corumba. Ayesh was small and thin, and she'd probably die without medicine. Rachel prayed as she ran behind the boys. A group of Indians took Nate and Javy into the village, where the chief wanted to see them. His wife was preparing breakfast. While they were eating, Javy and the chief talked. After a few sentences, Javy translated them into English. Nate ate, listened, and watched the village for Rachel. She wasn't there, the chief explained. She was in the next village looking after a child who'd been bitten by a snake. He wasn't sure when she'd return. He wants us to stay here tonight in the village, Javy said. Nate wished he'd brought the satellite phone. Josh must be very worried. They hadn't talked in almost a week. Lawyer Valdir took the early call from Mr. Stafford. I haven't heard from Nate O'Reilly in days, Stafford said. We have had many storms down here. You haven't heard from your boy? No, they are together. The guide is very good. The boat is very good. I'm sure they are well. They agreed that Valdir would call when he heard something from the boat. Valdir walked to the window and looked at the busy streets of Corumba. There were many stories about people who entered the Pantanal and never came back. Javi's father had piloted the river for 30 years, and his body was never found. Welly found the law office an hour later. Valdir came out to see him. "Who are you?" he demanded. "My name is Welly. Javi hired me to work on the Santa Lura." "Where is Javi?" "He's still in the Pantanal. The boat sank. Javi and Mr. O'Reilly left in the small boat to find the Indians." "When?" "A few days ago. I stayed with the Santa Lura. A storm hit, the biggest storm ever. It rolled the boat over in the middle of the night. I was thrown into the water and picked up later by a cattle boat." "Where was Javi during the storm?" Valdir asked. "Somewhere on the Capita River. I fear for him." Valdir walked back into his office, closed the door, and returned to his window. Mr. Stafford was 3,000 kilometers away. Javi could survive in a small boat. He decided not to call Mr. Stafford for a few days. Give Javi time, and surely he would return to Corumba. During dinner, Nate heard that the girl had died. A messenger arrived and delivered the news to the chief, and it swept through the huts. As Rachel entered the village with her Indian assistant Laco, everybody stood and stared. They lowered their heads as she walked by their huts. She smiled at some, paused long enough to say something to the chief, then continued to her hut. She was tired and suffering, and anxious to get home. Laco found Nate and Javi as the sun was falling behind the mountains. Nate followed the boy along the trail to Rachel's hut. She was standing in the door. "I'm sorry about the little girl," Nate said. "She is with the Lord." She sat outside the door. The boy stood under a tree, almost hidden by the darkness. "I cannot invite you into my home. Only married people can be indoors at this time of day." "How long did it take you to get used to living here?" Nate asked. "A couple of years. I missed home for 3 years, and there are times now when I would like to drive a car, eat a pizza, and see a good movie. But you adjust. I became a Christian when I was 14 years old, and I knew that God wanted me to be a missionary. I put my faith in him." "Can we talk about Troy?" The shadows were falling fast. They were 3 meters apart and could still see each other, but the darkness would soon separate them. "If you must," she said, her voice tired. "Troy had 3 wives and 6 children that we knew about. You, of course, were a surprise. He didn't like the other 6. He left them almost nothing, just enough to cover their debts. He gave everything else to you." "I haven't seen Troy for 20 years. "That's not important. He left his fortune to you. I have a copy of the will for you." "I don't want to see it." "And I have some other papers which I'd like you to sign, maybe tomorrow morning. Then I can be on my way." "What kind of papers?" "Legal stuff, all for your benefit." "You're not concerned with my benefit." Her words were much sharper. "You don't know what I want or need. You don't know me, Nate, so how can you know what's good for me?" "Okay, you're right. But it is very important for you to see these papers and sign them. All the heirs must tell the court, either in person or in writing, that they understand the will. It's required by the law." "And if I refuse?" "Honestly, I haven't thought about that. It's routine. Everybody always cooperates. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she changed the subject. Do you have family? She asked. I've had a couple. 2 marriages, 2 divorces, 4 children. I now live alone. Divorce is so easy, isn't it? We marry, then divorce. Find someone else, marry, then divorce. Find someone else. The Indians never divorce. You've never married? Nate asked. No. I thought I was in love once in college. I wanted to marry him, but the Lord led me away. He wanted me here. The boy I loved was a good Christian, but he was weak physically. He would never have survived as a missionary. How long will you stay here? I don't plan to leave. So the Indians will bury you? Most World Tribes missionaries retire and go home. They have families to go back to. You'd have a lot of family and friends if you went back now. You'd be quite famous. That's another good reason to stay here. Money means nothing to me. You're part of a culture where everything is measured by money. People work all the time to earn money, to buy things. They want to impress other people. It's sad. You're a very lonely person, Nate. I can sense it. You don't know God. I believe in God, Nate said, truthfully but weakly. It's easy to say that, she said, her words still slow and soft. But saying is one thing, living is another. That boy under the tree is Laco. He's 17, small for his age, and always sick. Laco is the first to catch every disease. I doubt he'll live to be 30. Laco doesn't care. He became a Christian several years ago. He talks to God all day long. He has no worries, no fears. If he has a problem, he goes straight to God and leaves it there. That little Indian has nothing on this earth, but he knows that when he dies, he'll go to heaven. Laco is a wealthy boy. Very gently she touched Nate's arm and said, You're a good person, aren't you, Nate? No, I'm not a good person. I do a lot of bad things. I'm weak, and I don't want to talk about it. I didn't come here to find God. Finding you was hard enough. I'm required by law to give you these papers. I'm not signing the papers, and I don't want the money. I'm sorry you came. You've wasted a trip. Laco said something. He needs to go to his hut, Rachel said, rising to her feet. Follow him. Nate slowly stood. I would like to leave tomorrow, he said. Good. I'll speak to the chief. I need 30 minutes of your time to show you a copy of the will. We can talk. Josh met Judge Wycliffe and showed him the video of Troy Phelan signing his testament. They watched the first part of the video without comment. It began with old Troy sitting in his wheelchair being examined by the psychiatrists. The examination ended with the agreement that Mr. Phelan knew exactly what he was doing. Wycliffe smiled to himself. The room cleared. The camera across from Troy was kept on. Troy took out the second will and signed it 4 minutes after the mental examination had ended. How are they going to sort this out? Wycliffe asked. It was a question with no answer. Rex and Libigale had already started to contest the will. The other heirs would quickly do the same. What about the will he signed first? Wycliffe said. He didn't sign it. But I saw him. It's on the video. No, he signed the name Mickey Mouse. From 1982 until 1996, I prepared 11 wills for Mr. Phelan. The law says that with each new will, the old one has to be destroyed. When he signed the new one, we, Mr. Phelan and I, burned the old one. He enjoyed it. He'd be happy for a few months, then one of his kids would make him mad, and he'd start talking about changing his will. If the heirs can prove he wasn't sane when he signed that handwritten will, then there is no other will. They were all destroyed. His estate will be divided between all his children. Why would he give $11 billion to an illegitimate daughter who's a missionary? Sounds a little crazy, doesn't it? You think that Phelan was crazy? Wycliffe asked Josh. No. Strange and very mean, but he knew what he was doing. Find the girl, Josh. Rachel spoke to the chief. He thinks there'll be a storm, she said to Nate when the meeting was over. He says you can go, but he will not send a guide. It's too dangerous. Can we get back without a guide? It wouldn't be wise. The rivers run together. It's easy to get lost. Even the Ipikas have lost men during the rainy season. I need to get back, Nate said. This trip has already taken too long. We have to talk. I have to go to the next village for the funeral of the little girl. Why don't you go with me? We'll have plenty of time to talk. Laco led the way. Rachel followed him, then Nate. He tried to persuade Rachel to take the money. If you had lots of money, you could buy lots of medicine. You could fill your shelves with all the medicines you need. You could buy a nice little boat to take you to Corumba. You could build a hospital and a school and spread Christianity all over the Pantanal. She stopped and turned. I've done nothing to earn the money, and I didn't know the man who made it. Please, don't mention it again. Give it away! Give it all to charity! It's not mine to give. It'll be wasted. Millions will go to the lawyers, and what's left will go to your brothers and sisters. And believe me, you don't want that. Those people will cause a lot of unhappiness if they get the money. She took his hand. Very slowly, she said, I don't care. I'll pray for them. They stopped by a stream for a few moments to rest. You said last night that you were weak, Rachel said. What does that mean? I'm an alcoholic, Nate replied. I've hit the bottom 4 times. I have no money. I'm in trouble for non-payment of taxes. I may go to jail, lose my license, and not be able to practice law. You know about the 2 divorces. Both women dislike me, and they've poisoned my children. I've wrecked my life. Anything else? Rachel asked. Oh, yes. I've tried to kill myself at least twice. Once last August, then just a few days ago in Corumba. I almost drank myself to death on cheap vodka. You poor man. I'm sick. I have a disease. I've admitted it. Have you ever confessed to God? He won't help you unless you ask. You have to go to him in prayer. He can forgive all your sins, and you'll become a new believer in Christ. I don't know how to pray, he said. She squeezed his hand. Close your eyes, Nate. Repeat after me. Dear God, forgive my sins, and help me to forgive those who have sinned against me.